Thank you everyone for being on time today. Today's session is the third of our thought leadership session for the Academy, which is going to be run by Econsultancy's CEO and founder, Ashley Friedlein. He's going to be discussing and talking to you about trends in online and agile marketing. So I'll hand it over to Ashley and enjoy.
Thank you very much, Carl. So I think this talk is going to be about 45-50 minutes. There will be time, if you want, at the end for questions. You can ask them during the presentation if you want, but otherwise you can keep them to the end. So probably no more than an hour. I think we've got 2 hours in, but an hour I think should be fine. So this was billed as a talk about trends in online marketing, I think. I wrote a piece, it's about 30 pages long, on my thoughts on what the main trends and my predictions for 2014 are in digital marketing. I'm happy to send that around to you afterwards. You can have a copy of this presentation. I'm not going to try and cover all of those trends and predictions because A, it will take too long, and also it might get a little bit boring, lots of facts and figures and charts and graphs and things. So I've decided instead to focus on one area which I think is particularly interesting, one area which is important for digital marketing, and in fact an area I think is changing fundamentally all of marketing, not just digital. So about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, in fact, on the way into work on the train, I'd been thinking about, there's lots of articles and speeches and talks about whether marketing and media fundamentally was changing as a result of the internet, as a result of social, as a result of mobile, etc. And some people said no, it hasn't changed. Some people say, oh yeah, it's changed forever and it's totally different. And actually I was wanting, my own personal belief was that there were lots of the principles were the same, but some of the ways you executed it were different. And actually that marketing itself, what marketing is, needed to be not necessarily redefined, but maybe reconstituted for a digital and post-digital age. And so essentially what I tried to do is write down what I thought marketing is. If you defined marketing, what are the different elements within marketing? That got refined, and then we published it both on Econsultancy and in Marketing Week. We called it the Modern Marketing Manifesto. It was the 12 elements of what we believe marketing, or what we call modern marketing, now to be. So that was, and you can Google that. Hopefully it's still ranking top or near the top. If you Google Modern Marketing Manifesto, it is interested for you to have a look to see whether you agree or not. But that was about what marketing is. Only one of the points in that really talked about how we actually do marketing, the process and the ways of working, whether you're agency side or client side. And that's what I want to talk about today. And I've called that Agile Marketing, as you see here. And maybe is this a new or an evolved way, or certainly more common way, I think, that we'll see that marketing is done and needs to be done. And it affects the way that we work, the way we deliver marketing. So, in the last 18 months, a lot of the most progressive companies in the world, maybe, have been launching a lot of new products. Google have launched Google Now. The FT have come out with Fast FT. Uber, the taxi hailing thing, has come out with Uber Rush. And most recently, Amazon have come out with Amazon Dash. Now, even after lunch, you should be able to spot a theme there. And that's obviously one of speed. So, Rush, Dash, Now, Fast, all of these companies recognize that speed is something which their customers value and want, and that therefore is of value to them as well. And then if you think, also about customer behaviour, and particularly mobile, which I'm sure you're all aware has been very fast growing, continues to be very fast growing, whether that's smartphones or tablets or whatever. And Google recently announced that on the 4th of December this year, so in the future, on that day, they know from their historical trends and predictive, looking at data from a predictive point of view, that the number of searches, more than half of the searches will be on a mobile device rather than on desktop. So this is people out and about, like us, I'm sure you know it from your own behaviour, who are looking for services, information, things to buy on their phones 24 hours a day, obviously in a particular physical context or environment. Twitter, likewise, recently announced that they have 80% of Twitter usage is now via mobile devices. So almost all of it, in fact, in terms of usage. And so you've got to think there's all of those people, including us, out there, interacting via mobile, predominantly via mobile increasingly. And yet, how many of your clients, or the work that you do, or indeed our own businesses, how have we mobile optimized our websites? As a basic starting point. Have we mobile optimized our search marketing campaigns maybe? Have we crafted our advertising and marketing around the fact that a lot of customer activity is happening out of office hours, on smaller screens or medium-sized screens? Have we set up our customer service to answer questions and inquiries on social out of hours? Have we set up our marketing and personalization and triggered emails or whatever it is to be responsive at the time when this activity is actually happening, as opposed to when it might suit us or the way that we've done it in the past? Because I don't think, if we're honest, we have really. So we are not, as marketers on behalf of our clients, I think, working or set up in a way which is optimal for the way in which actually the customers or prospects use and interact with what we create. This was quite interesting, musing the other day, what is wrong with this dude? What is he looking at? See this guy here? That's a close-up. The point being, he's the only one on this platform on the way into work who isn't looking at his mobile phone. You see here, the world. You see some follow-up tweets there that someone suggested that maybe he's looking for a charging point for his mobile phone. This is kind of, you might debate ethically or morally, is this a good thing or not, that no one's looking at the world or not looking at each other, they're all looking at their screens, but I'm sure you know this is how it is, because we're probably, a lot of you are like that, like this. So this interface is clearly hugely important. If you think also about social media, obviously, and how this phenomenon of second screening, third screening, fourth screening, so people watching television but also doing other things at the same time, a lot of that is social media. This is quite interesting. This shows the number of tweets per minute during, in this case, the quarterfinal of The Voice, BBC. So obviously a reality show competition. This box here shows the actual program as it aired on television. And you can see there are tweets, there's quite a high level of tweeting, and a fairly consistent pattern throughout this hour or so. Which is, I guess, how you'd expect it to be, really. You can imagine if you were there and people were saying, I thought that was good, bad, voting, whatever. But if you look at exactly the same thing, but for a different kind of TV show, this shows the same thing, but for a drama, in this case the finale of Line of Duty. And this shows the programme as it aired on television. And clearly there's a big spike of activity just as it's starting, probably because people are wondering what's going to happen. During the thing itself, they are actually more probably glued to the television and the intensity of the drama and the story, so they are not tweeting as much. And then at the end, bam, kicks off against the Now again, probably if you think about it, well that's, if you look at those different patterns, you think, yeah, I can see why they might be like that. But then if you think, well, as a marketer, or if you're doing TV advertising around this, or if you're the social media team for brands that relate to this, or brands that are advertising against the voice, perhaps, partners, well, A, have they actually got anyone doing that during the times that these are actually airing live on television? Hopefully, maybe, increasingly, but not always. But also the way in which you would choreograph or orchestrate your marketing, your timing of, say, you were doing a tweet as the brand, should be, you think, slightly different if you understood these sorts of patterns of interaction. And this is only over an hour of time, say, outside of the office time. But this is when this activity is happening. So again, my point is that I'm not sure yet that we are set up, whether it's agencies or the clients, operationally, sometimes technically, but from a people and process point of view, to be as reactive and responsive to this kind of these kinds of usage patterns they're not going away, I don't think. Again, just this is a video from Twitter which I'll play just to show you how fast Twitter talk about being marketing in the moment, or the heartbeat of what's going on in the real world, or a reflection of it, and to see how quickly that happens. So what this shows is Ed Miliband speaking in the House of Commons. He makes up a hashtag. This is a live television. You see, he makes it up. It's in his speech, but it's not a hashtag. As you'll see, it's downgraded Chancellor. It's not one that was popular or really existed before. And the white line, you'll see, shows the number of mentions on Twitter of that hashtag as he's speaking in real time.
Today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor joined Twitter. He could have put it all into 140 characters.
None.
Growth down, borrowing up, families hit, and millionaires laughing all the way to the bank. Hashtag downgraded Chancellor. Mr. Deputy Speaker, more of the same is not the answer to the problems of the last 3 years.
Half a second, seconds maybe. If you were, lots now, even some of the professional services firms, like the big tax firms, the big law firms, when the Chancellor maybe announces the budget, they are starting to get smarter at realising, well, there's going to be people, even business customers, searching or worrying about some new tax directive maybe, or something that's been announced. And they need to be able to have a comment, have a view, react to that quicker than their competition do. Because people will follow that. Often that leads to the highest search rankings as Google surfaces fresh, new content increasingly towards the top. You've got to be quick. So it's not just a social thing, actually, it's a search thing, and I say a marketing thing more broadly. And that's how quick it can be. So, Unilever and P&G, obviously two very well-known FMCG brand owners. They are credited almost with inventing marketing, or at least turning it into almost a science. So they have their processes, their marketing mix models that they've refined over years and years of doing what they do, and they do it incredibly well. They have done it incredibly well. But now, those kind of linear processes that they had, with all this speed, I'm talking about the fragmentation across the media channels, with the complexity of that and all the different data points and things, the speed of change, that some of those rule books that they have are starting to look a bit old-fashioned, a bit broken, and a bit out of date. And so they are trying to figure out, well, how do we operate in this social and multiple channel and increasingly real-time world? It's hard. This is not necessarily the wheel of disruption, it's a wheel of disruption, in this case from a company called Altimeter. But you can see in the middle here, this cloud, which actually was originated by a guy called Fred Wilson, who's a well-known internet VC based in New York. He called it the Golden Triangle, and it was this was back in 2009, the three things he said that were the greatest digital disruptors, the things in digital which are most disrupting business, not just marketing, actually got all of businesses. And they were real-time, social, and mobile. Bear in mind that was 2009, so that's quite 5 years ago now. Now I think we probably all agree that mobile, I'm sure it's in a lot of your conversations, social likewise. But real-time, which he predicted back then was going to be big, it's sort of happening in terms of real-time bidding, search marketing, display advertising and things in digital. But not, I don't think, necessarily in this, and somewhat in social. But this agility in the way that we can react to things, I'm not sure it's really happened yet. So I think this is why it's happening more and more. It will need to happen more and more. This actually has interesting implications for agencies and how they work with clients, which I'll give some thoughts on at the end. We asked, Econsultancy, we do lots of research. We did some research where we asked organisations about how effective we thought they were at real-time marketing. You can see here, this is the percentage of people who thought they were highly effective at real-time marketing, sort of 6%. This is about the strategy and tactics. This is about designing and delivering customer experiences, so responsive personalization and things. No one feels yet that they're particularly good at this stuff. So that's just the sort of, I think, some of the background. I'm going to now talk a little bit more about, well, how can you deliver on this opportunity? How can you become more agile? How can you become more responsive? How can you become more speedy? And give a few examples of where I think it's starting to see it done well. And I'm going to look at that across 3 areas, I guess. Technology, because you actually do have to have the technology often provides the plumbing, as it were, to actually make this possible. Without that, it's a nice idea, but you can't actually execute on it. And then the people and process bit. So some of that's about skills, some it's about culture, some it's about the way in which we work. So technology, I mean, first off, I guess, how many of you in the room are designers? Or, as in front-end designers, interactive designers, or any developers here? Okay. So you must, I'm sure you've heard about responsive design, responsive web design, there's adaptive web design, all sorts. But the idea of creating interactive or digital experiences which respond and change, scale up, scale down, change based on the device that the customer is using. Rather than creating multiple versions of something, you have one version which can adapt to the device that is being used. Now there are loads of good examples of this now. This one is just, this is Starbucks website. Yeah, nice enough website. But what's interesting, and you can do this, it's always often fun with various websites, to just stretch the browser window up and down to mimic from a high-res resolution desktop to maybe a lower resolution desktop, to tablet type resolution, to phablet type resolution, to mobile phone, to crappy old phone. There's all sorts of resolutions there and screen sizes. Now, so you can see here as I start to shrink this down, well, for start, the image itself is scaling down. That's the central one. You can see it scale down. As I keep going down here, this is, you see there's a jump there. You see the navigation goes from words to this hamburger menu, as it's sometimes called, which is obviously sort of almost accepted now as a design protocol, as an interface icon that people are used to for mobile tablets and mobile phones. The image, as you see, is still scrolling. Sorry, it's still shrinking. You can see here at the bottom there, you can start to see the layouts changing. So it's going from a 2 or 3 column down to a single column. So it's restructuring the content on the page. You see it again there, another jump. You can keep shrinking it. This is getting very sort of thin now. This is probably quite an old, again, another little jump there. So I mean, this is getting ridiculously slim. But it's still, that is still a function. You can see all of the buttons are rearranged. It's still a perfectly usable and functional site there. All the navigation at the bottom is rearranged in single column format and things. So it's not, I don't know, what your clients are asking for on this, but this, I think, is becoming expected, a standard thing you're doing using CSS. But it's just one example of being responsive, using technology to create a customer experience which responds to the environment in which of usage. This is an example of email, personalized email, which is being used in a responsive and intelligent way to add value to an event experience, a real-world experience. This was a colleague of mine called Mark, who's based in our New York office. He was going to the Adobe Summit in Utah, in America. So you can see, for starters, this is not anything particularly new, but the subject line, Mark, welcome to Summit, dear Mark. Okay, nice little bit of personalization. Talks about your commitment to the Adobe Partner Program. So this means that they know that Mark works for Econsultancy and that we're a partner of theirs for this event, so it recognizes that in the body copy. It knows that Mark works for a company that's in the media industry, and so it can tell them how many other people at the conference today are in the same industry sector as him. It also knows that it's the second time, so he's a repeat customer effectively. Second time he's been to this event, and tells him of the attendees here how many, whether it's their first time, second, third, or fourth. It recommends, again, based on his industry, the sessions that might be most relevant for him. And then finally, it's a kind of cute little touch, but this summit is in Salt Lake City, but Mark is based in New York. They clearly know that from his registration data. And so they give him the weather forecast back at home, back in New York. So this is a nice personalized customer experience. This email arrives as he's entering into the conference. Underneath that, of course, this is SAP, but there is data, there is a set of processes and rules and triggers. There are design assets and all the front end which needs to be built to come together in that email. There are profiles and segments within that. There's marketing automation, there's a recommendation engine to decide which, that previous example, which session is most relevant based on his profile. It's not actually, I mean, technically this is not rocket science, and even from a marketing best practice point of view, this is segmentation, it's personalization. But again, the thing is that I don't think many of us or many of our clients doing this actually very well yet. Might have been talking about it for a number of years, but still not doing it. This is an example from Econsultancy, which is real-time content recommendations. So when we have a blog post, we have a piece of technology from a company called Idigo, which in real time effectively reads the page, it knows about our archive of content, and looks at the semantic match between the two, and can recommend related content. So it's not a human doing it, this is a machine doing it. We actually ran some tests to see if the success metric in this case is a click on one of these recommended pieces of content. Looking at the click-through rate, we tested. We let our editors, the humans, make a recommendation, which obviously takes some time, and therefore costs some money. Also, if you imagine this was 2 years old, we still get some old articles do well in search, for example, because they've got lots of links at the time, they still rank well. So you get lots of traffic sometimes to archive content. The problem with human recommendations is that they date. So what was relevant 2 years ago might now be the most relevant thing, whereas the algorithm's always updating to the newest thing. just over 1% click-through rate is what the best human effort could achieve. The machine-driven bit, based on semantic matching, so it looks at meaning in the text and concepts and tries to relate bits of content based on those. Actually, good news for the humans, slightly less. I mean, much easier and cheaper and faster to do, but still not as effective as the editorial. However, when we did it based on behavior, so this is sort of that Amazon idea of people who saw this also liked that, or people who saw this tended to click on this kind of stuff. Again, machine driven. It was higher. Not by a huge amount, but then, you know, we get almost 1 million users a month to our site, unique users. That starts to become meaningful. If you're a B2B, it could be a high value opportunity, even if it's low volume. I sent these, when I sent these results through to our editorial team, they sent this back. It's the Terminator, Rise of the Machines. So in terms of the tech bit, that was just looking at some aspect of the technology. You know, if you had an iceberg and only the top bit is the bit you see and all the stuff that's underneath. What do you need? Well, you need all these pieces talking to each other. And that's often what you'll hear, that the barriers to doing some of this stuff is legacy systems, it's data that sits in different systems and silos around the business. Somehow or other, doesn't necessarily mean that you need to get a all singing, all dancing single piece of technology, much as people like Adobe will happily sell you that. But it does mean that these things need to be intelligently joined up, might be via APIs or whatever. But the wiring and the plumbing does need to be in place. It also means data. You, of course, will have heard, hear a lot about big data. A lot of our research shows, or when I'm talking to headhunters, recruitment people at the moment, some of the hardest people to find are analysts, people with data skills, particularly in the sort of digital world, and people who can not just use data but bring the insight analysis to it. Those people are very hard to find and in much demand, because they're the ones, again, who can technically wire stuff up, but then there's all the metadata and the mapping and the naming, the segments and the profiles and the rules, and it's there's complexity there. And then the examples that I showed you were not, database stacks or architectural things. They were just the experience that results from it. And again, there's a danger. Sometimes you see people going out and buying a piece of technology in the hope that it will fix their problems. Actually, it's much better to start with the customer personas, the customer journeys, how they work across different media, both digital and non-digital, and then figure out how the technology can enable those journeys. So the process and people bit. And I talked about data being a key new skill. There are others though. This is in digital, but I think in marketing more generally. Product managers. You don't have anyone, agencies often don't have people called product managers. Any product managers? No? So product managers you hear about quite a lot at the Googles and Amazons and Spotifys and all the internet companies. You hear about them in some of the media companies, so Guardian, BBC, FT. You hear about them in technology companies. Like the product owner, yes. And the interesting thing about these people, it's a bit like a producer in TV, I guess. They understand enough about the technology, but they're not developers or engineers. They understand enough about the user experience, the customer insight, the front end, the design, but they're not a designer or a graphic person. And they understand enough about the business requirements, the budgets, commercial targets, and they sort of sit in the middle of that. Now sometimes in an agency they might be called an account manager or a project manager, producer, but they are certainly in the Googles of this world, and I think some of the most progressive companies they are effectively the most powerful people because they are running the whole team. Usually a multidisciplinary team. They're the ones who have the vision for what this thing is going to be in the end, and how we bring together these various capabilities to make it happen. Often in agencies, I don't know how you're structured, but I used to work for what is now Digitas LBI, and I had various job titles, but in hindsight that's what I was doing. And then the account team, depending on the account manager, were mostly selling or invoicing or trying to sell more, and I was a delivery person. But actually, because the client didn't know what they wanted sometimes, I also had to come up with, well, okay, here's what we're going to do and why. And then I need to work with the tech team and the designers and the copywriters and everyone else to actually make it happen. But that's, say, it's a bit like a TV producer. If you say you're an internet producer or an internet product manager, to most of your friends, I think they have no idea what you're talking about. Whereas you say TV producer, it sounds quite cool. Marketing technologist, that's the other big thing, of course, in marketing with the internet and digital is technology. You know, not just data, but expectations of use of technology more broadly. There are these people now called maybe marketing technologists. They sometimes get called growth hackers. There's all sorts of words. But again, this what is coming out of Silicon Valley, and big corporates are trying to embrace this agility, this innovation, to try and be that they try buying startups, they try recruiting, headhunting, they try appointing chief digital officers, but essentially they're trying to get these peoples or skills where it's not just about the kind of traditional marketing, it's about bringing the technology together with that, because you need both. And the other bit then is about project management. So I mentioned project managers. When I was at the agency, we invented all sorts of proprietary systems and logos for our special process and way of working, which fundamentally were just a different version of think about it and then do it and then measure it. But you have to have your own special name. But most project management methodologies in the past have been fairly linear. So they're sort of Prince, waterfall kind of idea. If you're building a bridge, it's quite helpful. You can't really start in the middle and do a bit here and then the other. It has to be quite linear. And still some big projects, or if you're doing security or something for a bank, you can see why projects need a lot of specification, a lot of documentation, and they have to be done in probably quite a linear, sequential way. But in the world of software development, and what I'm arguing should be, and it is increasingly happening in the world of digital marketing, and increasingly marketing, is a more agile method or process. So this is about less documentation, less specification, because frankly, by the time you've written the big spec, it's probably changed what you want. Or the market's changed, something's changed. It's more rapid prototyping, shorter work periods, typically 2-week sprints. You do something, prototype it, build it, test it, launch it, reprioritize as you go. And this suits, say it came from software development, and there's the Agile Manifesto, which again you can look it up. These are some of the things which it allows or encourages: managing scope, delivering smaller stuff more often, rather than saying, well, you'll get the finished thing in 6 months. The problem is when we get it, we realise it's not what we wanted. So how do we reprioritize as we go, as things change? Transparency, collaboration, continuous feedback loop. Some of the actual ways that this happens in practice. This is a stand-up meeting. I don't know whether the tech teams do this here, but the Econsultancy development team, certainly every morning, it looks a bit like that. They stand up, there's 10 of them. They stand up, it lasts 5 minutes. Each member of the team basically says, what did they do yesterday, and what are they doing today? That's it. But it encourages transparency. You can't really very well say, did we do anything yesterday? Not really planning to do anything today. So you know what everyone's doing. That also helps the productivity. It also helps the productivity because sometimes I couldn't do anything yesterday because this has not been delivered or this hasn't been done yet. This is broken. So it identifies blockages in the workflow. It encourages collaboration. This also is called a Kanban board. Kanban is a business process originally from Japan. But these boards are just about visualizing workflow. So you sort of have stuff that's coming up, stuff that's in progress, and stuff that's done and ready for testing. And the tasks move across that way. And you can put different people assigned to the different tasks. Because the interesting thing about this is, A, you can change those sticky notes quite easily. But if you're going to move one in there, you've probably got to move something else out, because you can't do everything. There's a finite amount of resources. You can shuffle them how you want. You can't create time or resource that isn't there. And I wonder why marketing, or creative, digital people aren't also working more like this. Because I suspect if you're in marketing, if you've got clients in marketing, I'm not sure they necessarily know who is doing what necessarily. And it would be good, I think, particularly if we're going to be, as teams or agencies working for the clients, be more reactive, be more responsive, be more able to really prioritize stuff based on things that are happening. We need to, I think, work in an agile way, and actually software development has been having to try and tackle these challenges for longer, arguably, than marketing has. And this is, what we're starting to see happen is that we say Agile is currently in the tech software team. It's starting to move into the digital teams, because digital is where there's the most degree of change. Culturally, they tend to be the kind of people who quite like disruptive change. They like this agility idea. They like to be able to move fast, to change quickly. But it's starting to see it go into the broader marketing team. So this might be PR, brands, marcons, more generally. And in the end, maybe, actually, the whole business, lots of different departments, maybe even finance might be able to work in a slightly more agile way. Because companies are trying to grapple with how do they move more quickly, how are they more innovative, how do they keep up with the customers who are always ahead of them. Another important part of this, about this actually happening in reality, is actually to do with culture. There's another thing which large organisations, probably some of your clients and customers, struggle with. It's not just their legacy systems, it's not just the way that everything has to be spec'd and go through compliance and legal and it takes forever to get anything done. It's also that fundamentally the culture is not right, really. And then you could say this is because they're a bit old and the senior people. It's partly that, it's partly a generational thing. But it's also just the way they approach business. And these are the kind of hallmarks of what I would describe as a digital culture. If you go to any sort of internet, digital type company, this is how they are, not just in marketing, but as a business. In fact, here, Airbnb is obviously a great example of a business that is hugely successful in disrupting an entire sector, travel in that case, hotels in particular, Spotify, direct music. You're seeing this happening across most industry sectors. Healthcare is a really interesting one, of course, which you'll know more about than me, but and education's another one. Feels like it's on the brink of some quite major changes potentially. But if you can get the culture right, then actually the process is less of a challenge, less needs to be there. At the moment, what a lot of companies are doing is trying to adopt some of those agile things I talked about. So they're kind of doing agile, they're in the adoption phase. Very few, apart from some of these more internet companies, and they tend to be smaller anyway, it's easier. They tend to be probably startups, or have been startups in the last 5 years. Is this sort of idea of transformation, where they just are agile. As well as culture, it's to do with the way the organisation's structured. So not just the project management processes, but how do the teams work together? How are the departments structured? Now, most corporates still have a sort of command and control type structure with different hierarchies. They might structure, digital might sit on its own, might sit within marketing, rarely now in IT, but sometimes. But within that, Amazon is interesting. They have this notion that they call 2 pizza teams. So on most projects, they do not have teams bigger than 8 to 10 people, which is the number of people they reckon can feed 2 pizzas. Because any more than that, and it slows them down, too much committees, too much sort of just faff. And within that team, it's usually a product manager who'll be running it in an agile way, and they will have lots of different specialists in that. And once they've done that project, might be a couple of months, might be shorter than that, they disband and they move to the next project. So they don't sit always in the same department. Spotify has, again, interestingly, they started obviously quite small, they've got quite big, they followed agile processes, as I talked about earlier. And so they're now thinking, well, how do we do that at scale? How do you do that when you've got 500 people rather than 20 or 50? And they have this, what they call tribes, which is a bit like a business unit, I guess. And then you've got the product owners here, like product managers, who own a particular piece of Spotify, as it were. Might be the front end, might be a particular feature. And within that, they have these different specialists. But then across that, you can see they've got these ideas of chapters, or even guilds, which is a sort of loose coming together of people who might share a particular competency, a particular interest, a particular thing they want to sort of focus on. So this works across the organisation. Earlier I talked about Twitter and its usage with television there, minutes for tweets per minute. They have what they call their planning matrix. There's this idea about people, well, how do you plan for the unplanned? How do you set up? It's all very well saying you'll be responsive, but how do you budget for that? How do you resource for that? Got this sort of axis from planned to unplanned, from always on to events. And then saying, well, here, this is a planned event. Let's say that's a campaign. That's almost traditional marketing, as it were. Then there's the always on, but planned. This is the everyday customer service, responding to tweets, that kind of thing, maybe. And then you've got the always on, but unplanned. This is the responsive, agile, reactive bit. You've got to have people there. You've got the time and the tools and the skills and things to be able to seize the opportunity of downgraded chancellor. That's not planned. And that's not, it's always on. And then you've got live events, so particularly music festivals obviously, but any kind of event, you know it's happening, but you're not sure what's going to kind of pop out of it, but it's a live thing. So the World Cup would be a good example. There will be, you can think now, there will be brands who are thinking, well, we know it's coming, it's an event, we can plan stuff, so here's our campaigns, but what are we going to do if suddenly something happens, what can we do in this space here? So now a few examples. It's important to remember that whilst we are talking about, a lot of what I'm talking about is digital, actually this is really more about a mindset or a culture or a process rather than digital per se. And this is just a nice example, which isn't digital at all, and this comes from ages ago, but I think shows the kind of approach and kind of thinking. So this is in the US. It's billboard advertising next to a motorway somewhere or other. Audi come out with their A4, and they challenge their big competitor, BMW. So your move, BMW, is the new Audi A4. So, normally, I suppose, nothing would happen as a result of that. BMW might think, well, that's a bit cheeky, but so what? But no, BMW do respond. They put up a billboard a bit further down, picking up the chess metaphor. It's in checkmate. Is that the end of the story? No. Audi, not to give up. Your pawn is no match for our king with the R8. That was not quite the end, in fact, because BMW had the last laugh. This Zeppelin their Formula One car. So this is great. I mean, I'd be very surprised, given these really are arch competitors, and it's probably their agencies doing this for them. This is not planned. I mean, I doubt very much it's that guy who do this good thing and will all benefit from it. I highly doubt that. So it was unplanned, and they must have, but they all played the game, and probably everyone ends up winning. It's not digital, but it is responsive, and it is agile, and it is unplanned. So it is a way of doing things, a way of thinking, rather than a medium per se. However, this is an interesting one. If you saw this, is British Airways. They had a sort of campaign called Look Up, and this is interesting because again, it's digital, but it's outdoor media essentially. So this is a big poster, Piccadilly Circus. It's digital, as in increasingly all posters or all media is, and it interacts with technology that knows when planes, when British Airways planes are flying over. So the little child here comes to life as the relevant British Airways plane is flying over. So it's only a very short clip. I'll show you just to show you what it looks like. So again, it's just a nice creative, obviously quite arresting. It's using digital technology, but it's happening in real time. It's being responsive to events that are going on, but it's kind of planned as well because it's not kind of live responsive. But again, showing how we're taking traditional media and adding this digital experiential layer as well as this responsiveness or real-time element. This is happening, of course, in social. There is a lot of opportunities to do this for brands that are smart with social. This, again, just an example I came across recently. This is a lady called Heidi. Dear Kellogg's, look what I just found in my Crunchy Nut cornflakes. It's a chew it wrapper. You could have left me a whole one. So she's sort of poking a bit of fun at Kellogg's. It's not really complaining that much. But you should probably have something else in your cornflakes like that. So Kellogg's being quite smart and social. Notice that she's said this, it's a sort of complaint. Pick it up. So this, just spotted your tweet. Can you DM us your phone number and someone from Careline will call you? Thanks. I think, we'll see what the time lag was here. The next day, by the looks of things. Oh no, same day. November 22nd, November 22nd. So that's good. It's customer service, basically. Quick, friendly, but not, nothing that special. She rather cheekily came back and said, well, thinking about it though, you could send Tony the Tiger round to have breakfast with me. Guess what happened next? They sent around Tony the Tiger. Gets picked up in the local PR. It's actually her 38th birthday. So a nice, clever, not overly expensive, not overly difficult. But you see this kind of thing now happening more and more, this opportunistic... sorry?
Sainsbury's renaming.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you see the Argos one? Which was the Argos one? The guy who wanted something from Argos. Which was
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He wrote it in like street.
Okay. Yeah.
Like man and things like that. And they responded in the same
Oh,
tone
really?
of voice.
Well, that's very clever. Yeah, I have to have a look. I mean, it's now becoming much more common. I don't know in healthcare. There's some things where there's compliance and stuff. I doubt they may be quite as on the ball, but I think we'll see more of that, and actually customers almost expect it more. This again, I think is nice. Alex and Alexa, so they make children's clothing, babies' clothing, a retailer. And what they're very clever at is what you could call newsjacking. So seeing what's happening in the news, jumping on it quickly, creating something to seize on the moment. So again, it's not planned, but they have resources and team budgets set aside specifically to do that. So this was when Kate and William were touring in Australia and New Zealand, and obviously Prince George was out and about, loads of photos being taken then, and they spotted that he had some sort of nautical, not their clothes, but some nautical looking themed clothes. They quickly pulled together a collection of clothes that they had that fitted this theme, and said here, Prince George is already proving to be quite the little trendsetter. See our edit here. You go through, this goes through to their blog, and they have a little blog post. They've curated products, you can click on them and then buy them. So actually there's a direct commerce element on it. So rather than for them paying for advertising or paying to push stuff out there, they're just continually jumping on things as they come up and doing it very quickly. So again, obviously lots of celebrities, and someone who in this case I think Child is wearing one of their items of clothing, wearing our Stella McCartney kids jumper. Again, you can link through. This is embedded on their blog. It's like a little slide share-y thing. You can click through related products. So again, it's very smart, this. It's good for search engine optimization because you're getting all these sort of links out there. It's good because it's quick. It's not expensive because they're just using tools in their blog to quickly put stuff together. They're not a big, huge company with lots of marketing spend. So they are being agile. And this final case study, I don't know if you saw this one, no makeup selfie. So what happened? This 18-year-old from Stoke, I think, posted a photo of herself on Facebook with no makeup in support of, she had, I think, a friend who had breast cancer, lost her hair and things, and she wanted to show support, and she asked other women to post photos of themselves with no makeup on to raise awareness of breast cancer, to raise money for charities. So this, she posted sometime in the afternoon, started to gather momentum. Celebrities started, female celebrities, posting pictures of themselves with no makeup. Barbara's no makeup, for those with. Unless you haven't spotted. Brands, say that the smart ones who are good at this agile stuff, started to see the opportunity. Virgin, obviously good at this kind of stuff. Virgin Atlantic, here posting a photo of their hostesses without makeup. Cancer Research came up with this, a text, so premium SMS send beat to that short code in order to donate to Cancer Research. And they're using the no makeup selfie hashtag there. So sort of piggybacking something that they hadn't created. In about 2 days or so, they raised £2 million that way. They started bidding on it, see no makeup selfie, bidding on it in paid search, that phrase, which clearly hadn't existed before. They used all of their social channels, so this is obviously Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, etc., to get behind this campaign, which was an unplanned campaign. And, within 6 days, they'd raised £8 million. And obviously that's great to have raised all that money, but the interesting thing to me here is that you sort of had to imagine what's going on in those 6 days. And if you sort of wind back, that's what actually happened was, at this point, their social media manager, Aaron, was working. It's about 10 o'clock at night because they work shifts, which is interesting in itself that they have out of hours coverage. They're moving to 24 hours. At the moment, it's not quite. They sort of finish at 11 p.m. and start again at about 6. But this campaign has made me think they need to go 24 hours. So at about 10 p.m. we thought, oh, this thing, because they've got the social media monitoring tools in place, they see this thing bubbling up. You think, well, that's interesting. Let's see how that goes. By the next morning, And again, because based on their experience, we thought this thing is really kicking off. This is not just one of those little blips that we see all the time. And obviously it's about breast cancer. There were various questions there which cancer research felt they could go in and answer in an informational kind of service kind of way. But they had to be pretty careful about jumping in and say, basically making money off the back of something that wasn't theirs. It was not their campaign. This was an entirely user-generated thing. So they had to decide. They also noticed that a lot of traffic coming to their site was out of hours and it was on mobile devices. They also realised that actually if you're going to get people to donate quickly and easily, probably mobile was the easiest, quickest way to do that, rather than having to put in your credit card details and things. So they managed to turn around a text donation mechanic within 2 days. Now that's, technically it's not hard, but I don't know how many clients, brands can just do that quickly. And they had to decide, they had to get all the senior management together in order to get them to approve the fact that it was okay for them to piggyback this campaign. We'll say not the campaign, it wasn't theirs. The search team saw this trend, this term come from nowhere. We looked into the data and again said, hang on, there's an opportunity, we should be bidding on this, we should be paying for this. And you can see actually other cancer charities did do this here, this breakthrough, breast cancer care, they're actually competing, but cancer research were in there first, so higher up, top result in the paid search, and then got corralled all the other people around it, pulled them off whatever they were doing, make the most of this opportunity while we can, because after 2 weeks it basically just died away and gone. So you just sort of think that again, from a culture, from a process, from the tech, all the bits that needed to come together to jump on that thing, make the most of it while you can, because you know that it's going to go away again, and then maybe on to another thing. That's what I think is impressive and is a good example of bringing together a lot of the elements that I've talked about. So again, in terms of the people and process, I think some of the learnings, having coverage out of hours, it sounds quite simple, but again, most of us don't have that yet. Moving in terms of the way we work to more agile processes, trying to, in terms of our organizational structures, de-siloing them more, and probably having smaller multidisciplinary teams. And, as I say, the culture actually, which is almost the hardest thing often for large corporates, to empower their staff, to encourage experimentation, to be transparent, to foster a culture of a passion for learning and trying things out. And don't worry too much if it doesn't work the first time. So as I said somewhat early on, I think one of the interesting things for you guys as an agency, and say I used to work at agency side, is what does this mean how does this mean that because most of what I'm talking about, normally I'd be addressing client roles, so the internal marketing of digital teams. But a lot of this stuff, they rely on people like you to do for them. So how is it going to change that relationship if all this happens increasingly? We've done some research recently, and I would say at the moment, in terms of, we did a survey on insourcing versus outsourcing. So we're asking marketing, digital people, what areas of your marketing or digital marketing are you outsourcing to agencies or doing yourselves internally? And broadly speaking, they are taking more in-house, or rather they are increasing the size of their internal teams. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're spending less with agencies. It's just that digital marketing have always got more spend, so they might be continuing what they're doing in agencies, but doing more as well in-house. And that's particularly true in content marketing, content production. There's this, so not necessarily a move away from paid media to earned and to owned, but there's certainly a lot of investment and interest at the moment around content in its broadest sense. I'm sure for your clients too. And they, in the end, they think we should probably own that in-house. And to be fair, in most cases, I think they're probably right in the end, apart from some specialist skills. Social, likewise. In the early days, and say a few years ago, most clients would outsource that because they didn't have anyone who understood it. Increasingly, they're insourcing it. They might rely on agencies for more cutting-edge stuff, or experimental or technically complex stuff. But that day-to-day, in the Twitter thing, the every day, doesn't really make sense for an agency to do that for you, I don't think. Probably more expensive and not quite as close to the client, all that kind of stuff. Data is another one that clients increasingly, the data analysts I talked about earlier and this importance of data. At the moment they are outsourcing quite a lot because they just haven't got the skills, because it's hard to find these people, and they're mostly at agencies, but they're starting to employ data analysts, data scientists, visualization, whatever it is, analytics people, conversion rate optimization, etc. So the reason they're doing that is because they think strategically it's imperative they have some of these skills in-house, or it's cheaper, or because they don't want to have their agencies understand their own customers better than they do, perhaps. So this seems to be a challenge to agencies. So, well, what do we do then if they're taking all this stuff in-house? They're also, I think, looking at more modular ways of working with agencies. So if they're doing some of this everyday stuff, increasingly in-house, they still need to be able to pull on skills and things quickly. This is agile. But they don't necessarily know, it's hard for them to plan ahead because of this change and this need to be responsive. So they say, well, we need to have certain, particularly specialist skills maybe on tap, available as and when we need it. Again, well, that's sort of good for agencies because they can always need this because there's always new stuff. But how do you resource for that if you're an agency? Because it doesn't mean, how do you have, you can't have just people sitting around waiting for the client to call up. They also, I think, will expect, if the clients themselves are going to become more agile, in terms of stand-up meetings and using backlogs and all the sort of tools and practices of agile themselves, then clearly you have to try and think, well, how do we fit in with their way of working? I think we'll see more collaborative working patterns. I think tools and technologies are helping facilitate this. The file sharing, workflow, collaboration tools that are online, that helps. Actually, I think we might though still see more co-location, so where people from agencies physically go to the client, or indeed vice versa, where you've got teams that actually come together, which are a mixture of client and agency, and actually in some cases multiple different agencies working together in a team. Clients definitely still want innovation, and I think here this is where they most want agencies to push and challenge them and to be ahead of where they are. So again, the agile, this agility in the sense of always iterating, always experimenting, always improving, the basic tenets behind agile. That's what agencies add and will continue to add, should add value to the clients. And this, again, particularly interesting probably for agencies in terms of business models. One of the challenges, particularly for digital actually, less so for direct marketing or PR agencies, is that most digital work, when I say most, we've done various research around that. We did an agency rate card survey, digital agency rate card survey recently. And sort of 70–80% of projects or work is paid for on a project by project basis. So the problem with that is that then if you're the agency, you're saying, well, client says, how much is this going to cost? And by the way, we don't really know what we want and we're going to change it every 2 weeks. Like, well, I don't know. How am I supposed to quote for that? They go, well, we need to know, well, what's the deliverables? Well, we haven't got a spec, so how can we agree deliverables? Well, we don't have specs. So you're in this strange thing where they want to sort of bolt it all down, but if they're going to move towards this agile way of working, where you're continually changing, what actually they're buying is just resource or capability. They're not buying a deliverable or a finite project. But that's not the way it is at the moment. So I think we will see clients more open to actually saying, well, we'll agree a monthly amount budget, and maybe we'll agree it for a year, which is good for agencies because then you can resource plan and plan your business more effectively in advance because you know the money's coming, whereas projects are sort of feast or famine. So that's potentially good news. And then, so I was thinking, well, if this is the case, are there any examples of where this, well, I have seen this all of this stuff happening already in a sort of client agency context. And I don't know whether you got clients you work with in this way.
Not here.
Not here.
Yeah,
Okay.
New York.
Yeah.
So you work with IBM, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you read my mind. I recently went around this 590 Madison Avenue, where IBM had their design lab, which I was shown around, and they're a tech company obviously, so they're very used to agile ways of working from the software world, but they've applied this to their marketing, and actually IBM now have a big, basically agency with IBM Interactive Experience, which works in this way, but they're for IBM's own marketing, and they're a big company, they spend a lot on marketing. They work in agile ways, multidisciplinary teams, 2-week sprints, etc. They have IBM staffers, but they also have agency people, and they have about 4 or 5 different agencies in there, all in amongst the same teams potentially, and work on a sort of retainer type model using this agile way of working. So, and it seems to, it's early-ish days, but it seems to be working well for them. So finally, the future, where might this all go? This agility, this wheel of disruption I showed earlier. Think of all the other things, exciting things that are happening in internet and digital. There's 3D printing, there's Internet of Things, there's wearables, all sorts of. There's the maker movement, iBeacons, virtual reality or artificial intelligence, IBM Watson, Oculus Rift glasses, you name it. There's all sorts of cool stuff. Mostly that's tech coming, but which will change, again, I think, a lot of what we do, or a lot of what we can do. Just recently, Google announced that Android, their mobile operating system, was being extended, so they had Android Wear, which is specifically for wearables. And so you sort of imagine a world where, at the moment, talking about triggers, things that happen, social, or like that email I showed earlier, me turning up at an event, the things that happen which can trigger a marketing or customer experience response. If, as I'm sure will be the case, there are sensors in everything, and they're internet enabled, glasses, clothes, shoes like the Nike Plus and things, in our home, in our thermostats like Nest and those, which are streaming data. It's a lot of data, big data. How do we, as we move around, that's the opportunities then for doing interesting, experiential, real-time things, are even more mind-blowing than they are at the moment, since the speed that they're accelerating. So I have this kind of idea, this sort of metaphor, that in the end, what you want really is a marketing ecosystem that you can think of as a bit like a human, I think, where we've got our brains, which obviously think. They are like they have ideas, obviously, but they're the sort of, in a tech world, digital marketing world, they're the real-time decisioning engine. That thing I showed you back earlier, like the SAP thing, the rules-based, if this, then that, or it's the thinking bit. Then we have our senses, touch and taste and sight. And these are the things that are the sensors. So these are like the sensors in the clothing in the future potentially. This is like the social media monitoring technology that cancer research spotted this thing happening out there, the no makeup selfie, from a tech point of view. Our nervous system, which gives us, reactions, reflexes. This is something happens and we react in some ways. This is like, from a digital or marketing point of view, I think is like marketing automation. So we can program things to happen. So if this thing happens, then we do this, or if that changes, then personalize in a different way. And then, of course, there's still, whilst that's all kind of tech, while smart and intelligent, the heart bit, which is about the feeling, the emotion, the relationships, the storytelling, the brand, the passion, the curiosity, all these things don't go away just because we've got all this clever technology. Arguably, actually, they're even more important. So, in an ideal world, I think we have all of these things in our marketing. Relationships, all that cultural stuff I talked about, and then all of this intelligence which operates using sensors, using automation, using intelligence, increasingly artificial. We look in the future, a lot to talk about predictive analytics and personalization, so thinking what people are going to do or might want, as opposed to decisions based on things that have happened in the past. And finally, just to use good old Darwin, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. So from an evolutionary point of view, maybe if we are to thrive or survive even as marketers, then I think our ability to change and adapt, to be more responsive and agile, is incredibly important. So that's it. It's more than an hour, I think, in the end.